There is a saying, "Don't bite the hand that feeds you." So how far will a person go in pursuit of possession? What could possibly drive a playboy model to commit the ultimate act of betrayal on a generous man who was providing for her every need? Before we start, we would like to send our sincere condolences to the loved ones of Thomas Brouchard, who fell victim to the abominable acts described in this case. Dr. Thomas Brouchard was a well-respected child psychiatrist in Virginia. He had grown up in Boston, but moved to Virginia when his father, who had been teaching at Harvard, got a new job there. He began studies to become a doctor, and his experiences at medical school led him to develop a passion for child psychology. Little did he know that when he started working at the community hospital of Monterey Peninsula after graduation, that he would end up working there for more than 40 years. Thomas was well known as an extremely generous man, often buying medication or supplies for his young patients who could barely afford his sessions, let alone ongoing treatment. He was a kind soul, spending his spare time volunteering and mastering his long-held passion for magic. It was a skill which came in quite handy when working with his young patients. Making dollar bills magically change into hundreds is something he would do and would often let them keep. Given his work as a child psychiatrist, he had a deep understanding of how a person's childhood experiences could impact their adult behavior. And maybe that's what led him to forming fatherly relationships with troubled women, maybe hoping he could help them improve their lives as adults. He was particularly generous when it came to single mothers of young children. He was known to message the women online and send them a couple of $100s to help them with their struggles. These were women on their way to becoming prostitutes, struggling with drug addictions, or facing homelessness. Far from being physical or sexual, it appears that Thomas was genuinely concerned for the women and wanted to help them turn their lives around. But as Thomas aged, so did his sharp mind. Over the years, his longtime partner Judy Earp noticed early signs of dementia, things like forgetting people's names or getting lost on the way home from the supermarket. He had taken to carrying a small notebook in his pocket with his bank numbers and PIN numbers, so he could use them when he couldn't remember the passwords. But what changed most notably was the amount of money he was sending to these women. The payments started increasing, going from hundreds to thousands. As his mental state deteriorated, instead of helping many women, he seemed to be particularly focused on one. It was all seemingly harmless until his path crossed with Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was a 25-year-old woman trying to make a name for herself in California. As you might expect from an aspiring model, her Instagram offered a filtered view of her supposedly glamorous life. From bikini shots to risque tattoo pictures and dimly lit photos taken inside various nightclubs, she appeared to be living her best life. She particularly enjoyed editing her selfies to make herself look like a Bratz doll, with big eyes and heavy makeup. Scattered across Kelsey's feed was a slew of professional shots, which had been featured in Playboy Italia and Maxim magazines. Kelsey was a keen party girl, describing herself as impulsive and loving thrills and fun. She told Playboy Italia, "I'm living my life fully aware that it's the only one I have." Her bleached blonde hair and ample figure were her ticket to many men's affections. She refined her skills, becoming a master manipulator in her journey to the top, convincing unsuspecting men to pay for drinks, then clothes, and ultimately her lifestyle. But the Kelsey behind the filter was a mom of two, struggling to make ends meet with her few and far between modeling gigs. Her career had never really taken off, and whatever money she did earn, she spent on outfits and events as she tried to rub shoulders with A-listers. She was getting older and becoming more desperate to get signed to a major modeling agency. Kelsey was hoping for a life filled with all the glitz and glamour that modeling supposedly would entail. Her fortunes changed in 2016 when Kelsey was contacted by Dr. Thomas. After a quick Google search, she could tell that Dr. Thomas was the ticket to a lifestyle Kelsey would otherwise only dream of. She saw dollar signs, and lots of them. She knew how to play the game, and play she did. So began a dangerous liaison which would leave the beloved doctor stripped of his dignity and his life. Starting small, Kelsey would ask for a few $100s here and there to help her kids or to pay an outstanding utility bill. It didn't take long for her to realize there appeared to be no end to Thomas's generosity. She took more and more, getting a monthly allowance, and all with seemingly no work involved, just a sob story here and there, a cry at the end of the phone. As Thomas's mental health declined, Kelsey's demands for money increased. Soon he had leased her a new convertible car and was making the payments on her behalf. When Kelsey couldn't get approved for a rental home due to bad credit, he signed up for one in his name, ending up paying the rent and utilities. Soon, Thomas was paying for everything. Looking at the whole arrangement, it very much appeared that Thomas was Kelsey's sugar daddy. But when Kelsey would tell her friends about how much money she was being paid, she would deny that it was such an arrangement. She convinced her friends that there was nothing sexual or physical between them. Instead, she would say the doctor had a huge crush on her and wanted to make sure that Kelsey and her kids were well taken care of. Over a period of less than 3 years, Thomas contributed more than $300,000 to Kelsey's lifestyle, but Kelsey had nothing to show for it. She was still in the same situation she had been in at the beginning of their relationship. Kelsey was no further ahead, no more successful, and Thomas's money appeared to be funding Kelsey's party lifestyle, designer handbags, and plastic surgery addiction rather than on meaningful investments into her future. Even with his declining condition, Thomas knew that something wasn't right. He sensed he was being taken advantage of and decided to cut Kelsey off. Judy was supportive of Thomas's terminating their relationship and offered to help, even getting social workers involved. For years, Judy had known that Kelsey was using Thomas for his money, but he was his own man and could do whatever he liked with his money. Judy could see from Kelsey's social media that money was being wasted rather than being used to improve the lives of her 2 kids, as Thomas had intended. Kelsey knew that Judy despised her and was trying to get Thomas to cut her off. She even sent messages to Thomas stating that his girlfriend was, quote, on the list with me, and if she gets me evicted, I'll kill her. Judy encouraged Thomas to tell Kelsey that he was done paying for her life. Thomas preferred to meet in person, but eventually conceded it was time to get it over and done with. He let Kelsey know that he would no longer be paying her rent, and their arrangement had come to an end. The thought of Thomas cutting her off enraged Kelsey. She felt entitled to his money. She felt she deserved everything he gave and more. And so Kelsey began to show her true colors. Her dark side emerged. Rather than give up, she dug her claws in deeper and deeper into Thomas. She began to threaten Thomas, saying that she would go to the police and tell them horrible things about him interfering with children. A devastating accusation for a child psychiatrist. These claims, no matter how untrue, would most certainly end his career. Although Thomas knew the claims were false, he also knew that even the whisper of them would devastate his practice. He was tired of Kelsey's games, and even with Judy's support, he was so embarrassed by this relationship with Kelsey that he went along with her demands. He continued to pay her rent, her car payments, and gave her extra cash on top. At the end of 2018, Kelsey decided to move to Vegas. She had lost custody of one of her 2 children and wanted to start fresh in a new city where she might strike it famous, rather than the overcrowded area of Southern California. She convinced Thomas to pay for her move, and he leased a new house for her to live in when she arrived. Thomas didn't hear from her for a couple of weeks until early March, when she messaged him, apparently in desperate need of his support. This time she told him she was sick and couldn't work. She went on to reveal that her new boyfriend was abusing her and she couldn't even afford to feed her son. Thomas, with his soft heart and trusting nature, gave in and sent her more money, telling a friend he felt partially responsible for her situation. But after this time, he knew he was done. He wouldn't be sending her any more money unless he knew for sure that she was telling the truth. He had already come to realize that she was a pathological liar, though he'd been in denial for some time. In a final act of generosity, Thomas paid 3 months of rent in advance for her new place in Vegas. Then he decided he needed to see for himself whether her claims of sickness and abuse were true or whether she was just taking him for another ride. Despite Judy's pleas to stay home and instead cut Kelsey off from afar, Thomas booked a flight to Las Vegas. Judy tried to convince him to take her along, but Thomas was determined to do this on his own. He left for Las Vegas on the 1st of March 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a caller reported an abandoned Mercedes-Benz convertible on a dirt road not far from the Lake Mead recreation area and just 20 miles outside of Las Vegas. It was wild desert there, jagged mountains covered in low, scrubby sagebrush. Its location, just off the highway, means it was an area frequented by drinkers and travelers. Trash and glass littered the dry, red earth. The vehicle's windows were rolled down, and it looked like a fire had been lit in the passenger seat, although it had burned out and didn't reach any further than the headrest. Throughout the car were bottles, latex gloves, and personal items. Blood was spattered across the driver's seat, back seat, and headrest. And there's a smell, an unmistakable smell. When officers opened the trunk and pulled aside the piles of clothes and blankets, they found the body of an adult male. It was the bruised and battered remains of Dr. Thomas Brochard. Thomas was found partially clothed with trauma evident across his body. His autopsy later revealed that he died from multiple blunt force traumas to the head. But that's not the worst of it. Across his face, neck, arms, and chest were hundreds of bruises, scrapes, and cuts, some of which formed a unique pattern. Part of one ear was missing, and he was unrecognizable given the blood and bruising to his body. His hands showed obvious defensive wounds. He had been left in the trunk of the car for at least a few days, and the decomposition of his body was accelerated by the hot Nevada sun. Judy had reported Thomas missing on the 2nd of March when he didn't reply to a text message she had sent him. When she was called to be told about his body being found, she was advised not to view his body due to the gruesome injuries and decomposition evident. It wouldn't take long for police to identify the vehicle as being leased by one Kelsey Turner. A missing persons report for Dr. Thomas Brochard was associated with the same address as her car, so Kelsey became the #1 suspect from that very moment. But how did Thomas come to be beaten to death and abandoned in Kelsey's sports car? Surely one woman would not be capable of brutalizing this man so savagely all on her own. It was possible that Kelsey had help. Based on testimony as well as extensive police investigation, this is what happened to Dr. Thomas Brochard. Thomas arrived in Las Vegas on the 1st of March 2019. The home he had rented for Kelsey was a normal-looking family home. On the top floor lived Kelsey and her boyfriend John, as well as Kelsey's son and a roommate, Diana. Downstairs lived another roommate, Jeremy. The roommates, courtesy of Thomas paying the lease for Kelsey, were living in the house rent-free. According to the two roommates, on the 2nd of March, Jeremy's girlfriend showed up while the others were drinking and talking. Knowing how much Thomas was giving Kelsey to fund her lifestyle, she began chatting him up. She, too, was a curvaceous blonde and an aspiring model looking for a fully funded life. Like Kelsey, she saw dollar signs and an easy target when she looked at Thomas. When the group decided they wanted some snacks, she offered to drive and take Thomas along, hoping their time alone would lead to a profitable arrangement. Kelsey flew into a fit of rage. Firstly, she was furious that Thomas had even come to Las Vegas to scope her out and potentially cut her off. And there was this bimbo looking to steal her meal ticket from right underneath her nose. Kelsey wouldn't have it. She lost it, screaming at the woman until Jeremy and his girlfriend left. That same night, Kelsey found explicit photos on Thomas's phone. Even worse, they were from Kelsey's own mother. As it would turn out, Thomas had been giving Kelsey's mom money as well, after she too had contacted him with her sob stories and begging for his help. Kelsey erupted, screaming that she was going to get Thomas fired by exposing his supposed inappropriate behavior with children. Thomas freaked out at the escalating situation and locked himself in Kelsey's son's bedroom. Thankfully, Kelsey's son was sleeping over at a friend's house that night. As Diana explains it, this was the beginning of the end of Thomas Brouchard's life. With Kelsey's encouragement, Kelsey's boyfriend, John, kicked down the child's door and entered the room armed with a baseball bat. Moments later, when Diana ran into the room, Thomas had a large red bruise on his temple just above the eye socket and blood was dripping down his face. Diana managed to convince John to put the bat down, and she got Thomas a glass of water. It was clear that Thomas needed medical attention. He was going in and out of consciousness. Kelsey and John had gone downstairs, but the only way out of the house to get help was by going past them. Thomas and Diana slowly went downstairs, Diana supporting Thomas as they moved. Eventually, they made it into the garage without incident. Thomas climbed into the back of Kelsey's car, the same car that he had been paying for, waiting for John or Kelsey to drive them to the hospital. Diana couldn't drive, so she sat in the back of the car with him, soothing him and trying to keep him conscious. She kept repeating that he didn't want Kelsey to get in trouble, and if anyone at the hospital asked what happened, he would say that he had been mugged. But as time went on, neither John nor Kelsey came to drive him for medical treatment. He started to mumble to Diana that Kelsey was probably going to kill him. Finally, Kelsey came out into the garage and ordered Diana to clean up the house. She told her to clean the blood from the walls where John had hit Thomas and to make sure to get it off the bed in her son's room, and she demanded that Diana wash their bloodied clothes. Kelsey said that she would take Thomas to the hospital once the house was cleaned and everything had calmed down a bit. But Thomas, suspecting a ploy to get him back into the house and vulnerable, refused to get out of the car. As Diana walked upstairs, she heard Kelsey yell to John to knock Thomas out. She ran back down to the garage, but it was already too late. Kelsey stopped her from going into the garage and told her to go back upstairs and start cleaning. Even though Diana was older than both John and Kelsey and appeared to be more mature than both, she did what she was told. Thomas, a 71-year-old man, was sitting vulnerable in the back seat of the car when the frenzied attack began. Kelsey's greed for money had turned into a violent bloodlust. Already battered from the baseball bat to the head, he was hit multiple times with the butt of a gun and another unidentified object, leaving a zigzag pattern across his face. His ear was partially removed with a knife, and he was repeatedly hit. His blood spattered throughout the vehicle. Given the car was a two-door, he had no chance to escape as Kelsey and John continued to brutalize him. The following day, Kelsey's phone records show that she drove out to the desert where she abandoned the car containing Thomas's body. It is not known if he died in the back of the car or was alive when his body was stuffed into the trunk. Thomas had been due to fly home on the 4th of March. When Judy didn't receive any reply to her messages and he didn't get on his flight, she advised police that she was concerned that he had been murdered and immediately named Kelsey. She filed a missing persons report with all the details that she could recall, including the address of the house in Las Vegas he was paying on. Police conducted welfare checks on the home on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th of March. Each time they were unable to locate or make contact with Thomas. Despite finding the house unlocked and the lights on, there was no one home when they entered the house. They did notice that cleaning supplies were littered throughout the home, and they noted it appeared as if the residents were moving out. Nothing else suspicious was identified during those welfare checks. No calls or messages had been made from Thomas's phone after March the 3rd. Thomas had no chance to call for help, and the only other person in the house who might be able to help ignored the violence unfolding inside the home. Diana was aware something seriously wrong was happening in the garage, but she chose to stay upstairs cleaning rather than call for help or intervene. In the days following Thomas's murder, she continued to assist with the cleaning of the house and getting rid of the evidence. As the investigation gained momentum, it became obvious who had the most to gain from Thomas's death. Kelsey was front and center. It was clear from Judy's missing persons report that Thomas had traveled to Las Vegas to meet with Kelsey. Thomas was found inside her vehicle, and the house where Kelsey lived showed evidence of a cleanup. Even the blue and white striped towels found wrapped around Thomas's body matched those found in Kelsey's home. And after police spoke to Judy, they realized Thomas's notebook with his bank numbers and passwords were missing. A warrant was issued for Kelsey Turner's arrest. Police went public with the story of a kind doctor brutally murdered for money by a ruthless gold digger. The FBI became involved once they were tipped off that Kelsey had crossed state lines back into California. On the 21st of March 2019, Kelsey was found by police hiding out with friends near Stockton, California. Her 4-year-old son was with her at the time and was immediately placed in the care of social workers. After Kelsey's arrest, a date was set for extradition from California to face justice in Las Vegas. But Kelsey wasn't out of tricks just yet. While in custody, she revealed that she was in fact pregnant with her 3rd child. This meant a delay in her extradition while her health assessments were completed to ascertain if it was safe for her to travel to Las Vegas. Kelsey denied any involvement and instead implicated Diana. Diana came forward voluntarily. She spoke with police and told them everything she knew. Diana was charged with conspiring to commit murder and accessory to murder. Diana implicated both Kelsey and John for Thomas's murder. John was arrested a few days later and charged with felony murder. He initially pleaded not guilty, but later changed his plea to guilty after being offered a deal by prosecutors. Earlier in 2022, he received a sentence of 18 to 45 years in jail. Kelsey continued to deny any involvement. In court, she appeared moody and pretentious, playing with her hair and pouting her lips. Her claims that she couldn't be responsible were repeated. Her lawyers argued that her small stature of 5'4" and 120 pounds meant she was physically unable to move Thomas's body from the back seat of the car to the trunk where he was found. And again, she pointed her finger at Diana, claiming that she only came forward so she could manipulate the story and tell police what they wanted to hear, so Diana would be out of the frame. While Kelsey was in custody, she gave birth to a daughter who was immediately moved into the care of social services. Kelsey's trial had faced multiple delays due to her pregnancy and COVID. It is now set to go ahead in November 2022, where we are sure we will hear more sordid details about Kelsey, her manipulation of Thomas, and, of course, his brutal murder. For Judy, the pain of Thomas's loss continues. In the months leading up to his murder, she had been trying to convince him to cut Kelsey off completely. She felt that Thomas was about to do so when he made that fateful decision, in line with his old-school values, to have the conversation face-to-face rather than over the phone or by message. But it's not just Thomas's loved ones who are suffering in his absence. Also feeling his loss are his patients. Some of his patients who he had treated as children had grown up and now had children of their own who would come to see Thomas. He was like a member of their extended family. Not only was he well regarded professionally, he was also known as a good, kind person, a generous man who could never do enough to help others. Kelsey had violently slaughtered Thomas for one single motive: money. A greed that ran so deep she took a dedicated and experienced doctor away from his patients and community, and a loving man away from his friends and Was she always a cruel and calculating vixen? Was her true nature hiding behind the bikinis and selfies until her insatiable greed could no longer be satisfied? Or was she the fun-loving party girl she claimed to be, who wanted to make the most of this one life she had? Found this story compelling? Don't forget to like the video, comment down below with your take, and subscribe to the channel. Also, hit the notification bell in order to stay up to date each time we reveal a new shocking case. And until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled. You never know what's lurking in the shadows.